Let's open our Bibles to the book of Romans. We're looking at the decline and fall of the human race that's most eloquently presented by the Apostle Paul in Romans 1. And as you know, starting in verse 18, he talks about the cause for that decline and fall. And especially, starting in verse 26, I want you to follow along with me as I'm going to read in just a moment. But it's curious that right between all those dreadful sins, and you know this is the New Testament, one of the two or three very clear admonitions that God gives, that homosexuality in male or female forms is damnable and horrific to him. I mean, the people that say it's only in the Old Testament show their lack of knowledge of the New Testament. But right in the middle of all that, and that's not at all what we're talking about, but right in the middle of that, curiously, is one of the age-old sins that impacts grace-energized mothers. Just follow along with me as I read starting in verse 26. It says, "For this reason," and that's all that gross immorality that is caused by the suppression of God. "For this reason, God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature." That's lesbianism. "Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust for one another, men with men committing what is shameful and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error which was due, which is homosexuality." Verse 28, "And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind, to do those things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things." Now, what's right in the middle of that horrible list? Do you see what the next one is? Doesn't that look a little bit out of place? I mean, it's with the lesbian and homosexual gay activist crowd and the murderers. And look what it says, the very last three words of verse 30. Disobedient to parents. Disobedience to parents has bad company. I'd stay as far away from disobedience to parents as possible. You don't want to run with a crowd God puts it with in the Bible. And then he picks up in verse 31. "Undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful." And you see at the end of the chapter, he says that anybody that's involved in any of this type of sin, knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. You see, not much has changed in 2,000 years, has it? The sins are the same, the struggles are the same, the family conflicts are the same. It's just the same challenges, the same old sins are still swirling around us. Each of us face them every day. And God wanted those lost pagans living in Crete to see the changed lives. See, Paul was writing this letter to the epicenter of the Roman Empire, to Rome itself. But those sins you see that I just read and emphasized with my voice were the sins that were just prevalent. In fact, most commentators believe that Paul actually wrote the epistle to the Romans sitting in the city of Corinth, most likely, since we know where the leather workers guild was, where the shops, because they were like Chinatown and Little Italy, the leather workers all stayed in one part of town. And in Corinth, they've excavated that part of town, and it exactly faces the gymnasium area, the gymnasium, the sports area. And I've told you many times that this behavior, this immoral behavior, often swirled around the bathhouses, the sporting complexes, and all the gymnasium, where they did the Greek style, where they did all their exercises with no clothes on, which fomented all of that type of behavior. But God wanted those lost pagans, whether in Rome that was going to get this letter, or in Corinth, where Paul was kind of looking out the window and seeing all that debased debauchery and sordid conduct. God wanted the lost pagans, whether there or in Crete, as we're studying, to see the changed lives of believers and to be confronted with living examples of Jesus Christ. See, again, still nothing has changed. It doesn't matter where our culture is on the spiritual decadence Richter scale. It doesn't matter where we fit, whether we're more light, less light, worse, better, whether evil is growing faster or whether it grew faster back then. It doesn't really matter. What matters is God's purpose. God's purpose has always been that the world see the changed lives and be confronted with living examples of Jesus Christ. That's us. Do you realize Acts 11 tells us why we today are called Christians? We are called Christians because in the city of Antioch, another major city of the Roman Empire, the people were disparaging the followers of the way. That's what they're called before that. They're called believers and followers of the way. But in Antioch, a huge city, maybe the third or fourth largest of the Roman Empire in the ancient times, the people there said, these followers of the way, these believers are little Christs. Little Christs, which began to be called Christians. It was a diminution, a diminutive of the little Christ. They just said Christians. They're little Christ. That's what God wants us to be. Living examples of Jesus Christ. Society was to be flooded at every level with the irrefutable proof of changed lives. How?